Is Babylon a masterpiece? Let's ask that amazing question today. Babylon is the new film by director Damien Chazelle, who directed Whiplash, La La Land and First Man. It depicts the Hollywood scene from the late 1920s to early 1930s. It's certainly not going for utter historical accuracy, it's much more so a loose interpretation to tell a fun message about the time. Well, not a fun message maybe, but an interesting message, an interesting sentiment about that whole era. Now I want to get right into things. This is a 3-hour film, by the way. Walking out of this, I was quite solidly convinced that I just watched a masterpiece. There's so much perfection to how this movie was put together. It took me completely off guard. I had no idea it was going to be this good because I thought I'd have heard something about it priorly because it was out in America before England. However, I was a little bit apprehensive at dubbing this film as an all-encompassing masterpiece. There are a few things about it that I couldn't quite put my finger on that were making me think there may be a few things missing here that makes it just fall short of being at that level. And we'll discuss those things as we get further into the video. But I'll start out with naming the positives, of which there are a sheer abundance of. On a technical level, this film is essentially flawless, and that's mainly regarding the pacing, cinematography, editing, and overall direction. The film shines in all of those departments. So as mentioned before, this is a 3-hour film, and there's not an ounce of fat on it because the pacing is seamless. Every scene is this fast-paced, high-energy marvel of amazing cinematography and composition, great acting, funny editing. The direction is overwhelmingly vibrant, and so much of the story is told in this fast-paced, chaotic manner, but it always feels 100% appropriate for what they're trying to convey on screen. And sometimes there are a few brief moments where it slows down, which also came at the perfect times. Just this film knew exactly what to do at all times. How to show this, how to shoot this scene, what tone to go for here, when to slow down, when to speed back up again. It's just ridiculously impressive. The scope of the production is huge, and that adds to the cinematography because you'll have these grandiose shots with thousands of extras and so many moving parts that all blend together perfectly. It's not just that rule of thirds, it's well composed, but the director hasn't made it easy for himself and he's had to scrutinize over every single little detail in frame, and there are quite a lot of scenes that play as these huge spectacles. A lot of the scenes are depicting the filmmaking process and just the chaotic nature of that, and that's one of the themes of the film. But on so many occasions does the filming of these spectacles become the spectacle in and of itself. There's one very poignant shot where they're filming a medieval battle, and it starts from the perspective of the camera within the film that they're filming this movie on, and then it cranes up and over and you can see it on a bigger scope and you can see the entire rest of the set. You see all the behind the scenes stuff and it becomes so much bigger than just this medieval fight scene itself. So it's not just that there's pretty cinematography, but there are so many extremely dynamic shots in this film that almost beggars belief, how do they capture this kind of stuff? But this is Damien Chazelle pushing himself to the edge, and it's a great point of progress in his career.
But also within that, recreating each studio experience, and within that, recreating each of the sort of fictional movie sets. You're talking about sets within sets within sets.
And he also knows exactly how to light a scene as well, so it's also gorgeous in that department. The precise balancing of colours and shadows, very pleasing to the eye and not in any surface level way. The camera's also constantly moving about, there's so much energy on screen. Visually it's the most energetic film of 2022, and that also adds to the intricacy of the scenes. Every bloody frame has had a vast amount of effort put into it, and this kind of leads into one of the big themes of the film, which is the pure chaos of old Hollywood. Now again, I can't attest to the historical accuracy of all of this stuff, but I still appreciate the message that it's putting across. There's not been a film that's depicted Hollywood as crazy as this, and that's where that frenzied cinematography comes into use, because it's an onslaught of high-octane, overdramatic, dangerous shenanigans, whether it be about the filmmaking process or Hollywood itself. The whole first 30 minutes of this film is centered around this ridiculously lavish and over-the-top party. Pretty much an orgy actually, and that party sequence puts the raw in Roaring Twenties. And it was quite jarring for me because I associate the 20s as a fairly conservative time, but you know that there were these crazy, ridiculously wealthy people that thought they were like kings and they did all this weird shit, because it's literally like the last days of Rome. The degrees that this film goes to for depicting the debauchery of Hollywood, I don't really think have been matched by any other film. That's at least one consistent theme that this film absolutely nails. It's Wolf of Wall Street like in terms of the level of excess, of drugs and sex. And it's great because it all has a solid point to be there. You almost view this class of rich elites as these alien beings, because it's so wild and over the top that it kind of borders into Illuminati territory. You know, like the scary things you can do with that much money and power. Just the level of indulgence. So obviously this film is partially being satirical, and it's very over the top and raunchy. And there are a lot of other satirical films that go for that overt tone, and sometimes that overt tone can be annoying and ham-fisted, but I never really felt that with this film, which I'm happy to say. It always felt appropriate, it always felt tastefully done and subtle, even though it was literally some of it just right in your face. But it wasn't like some juvenile Netflix original satire where it's all like, bro, look at this shit, bro. That's a very poor illustration of that. Ooh, man bad! It also does an awesome job at showcasing the dangers of filmmaking. I mentioned that medieval scene before, so obviously there was no gory violence in those older films, but this film suggests that behind the scenes there was a lot of that going on, with regards to numerous extras just constantly being horribly injured on set from all of the stunts that they had to do. There are brief moments of extreme gore in this film. People die, people get horribly mutilated, and it's quite funny and ironic that all of this is going on whilst making this very conservative movie. It's kind of like when the actress who's playing the pretty Hollywood beauty, the perfect virgin, behind the scenes she's doing like a full line of coke and getting railed by like 10 extras. Now this film takes place at a key transitional period in Hollywood, this being the rise of talkies in I think 1927 with The Jazz Singer. It's essentially when films started having audible dialogue in them, and it completely changed the game, and that was very interesting to watch some of the characters deal with that. Because now that's just utterly the common practice, but back then there were so many people going, oh, what the hell is this going to do to the art form? And you can see very clear shifts in how movies were made after this transition. Certain stars that became washed up because they could no longer survive in this new era of Hollywood. Even though change has to happen and it's inevitable, it is slightly sad to see the end of the silent era. There's this one scene in particular that really does a great job at showing the struggles of filmmaking, like the sheer strenuous nature of it, and it goes on and they keep having to cut and redo it, and it's hilarious, but it's also like, oh my god, that's so stressful. And for as long as it goes on, it never gets tired. You're always captivated. It was sort of reminiscent of the story behind the making of The Wizard of Oz, where essentially all the cast members were suffering horrible fates constantly and like boiling to death. The film also hints at Hollywood's ties with the criminal underworld of Los Angeles, and that's very interesting. It actually goes to some really dark places that I was not expecting at all. But despite all that, it never becomes like an extremely dark film. It has very dark moments, but it also has very comedic moments and very like funny moments, but it's never constricted to a singular feel. It just balances so many different emotions.
Shouldn't stand in the way of progress.
This is gonna be what it's gonna be.
And unfortunately, we're moving on to some of the criticisms I have with the film. Now, that largely stemming from the characters. Now, they weren't bad performances by any means. They weren't even like poorly written. It was just I didn't find myself emotionally connecting with these characters to the extent that I think the film wanted me to. I enjoyed watching their stories, but it was more like on a symbolic level for what they represented within this Hollywood era. Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt give some very good performances in this movie. They're utterly convincing. They're doing a fine job. However, at least with Brad Pitt, it's definitely a very similar performance to other things he's done. We've seen a lot of Brad Pitt performances like this. It was appropriate for this film, but just by now I've seen him do this thing so many times. This sort of southern, gruff, macho American exterior.
What I do means something.
I sure as hell didn't come down from the goddamn Smoky Mountains, cross 5,000 miles of water.
Anybody accidentally kills anybody in a fight, they go to jail. It's called manslaughter.
He's good at it, but I've just seen him do it too many times. The character Manny, who was played by Diego Calva, was also a major player in the film. I liked how a lot of the film was centered around him. It was a good way to introduce the audience into this world, because he essentially started this film as a normal Mexican worker who was in charge of delivering this elephant to this huge Hollywood mansion for some high society party, and that's the only reason he's there. And there he meets Margot Robbie's character, and it's kind of like an Almost Famous thing, but I liked how that was a no-name actor, and you see a lot of it through his perspective. Now, unfortunately, despite the filmmaking being jaw-droppingly good, I was never overwhelmed with emotion while watching this film. Maybe that wasn't the overall intention, maybe you are supposed to just look at it objectively and comedically, but I didn't have like a deep compassion for any of the characters. I was just interested in their stories. A good thing to compare it to is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was a film where I fiercely connected with the characters. Babylon didn't provide what Once Upon a Time in Hollywood did in that regard. I also think that my enjoyment of this movie was affected by this influx of Hollywood movies about Hollywood that we've been having recently. We have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we have Mank, we have Nope, we have Under the Silver Lake, and even Licorice Pizza. We've just been getting a lot of very interesting exposés of old Hollywood, or just Hollywood in general, and maybe there's just been a little too much of that. It's like this trend of modern accomplished directors going back and making stories about their favourite eras of Hollywood. But still, if someone told me that they loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'd definitely recommend Babylon to them. Overall, there's just a few little things that are holding this back from being a masterpiece, like say Whiplash, because I do think Whiplash is a total masterpiece. I don't know if there's a lack of focus to what this film is all about, or if there were messages or themes that weren't properly pronounced. Who knows, eh? I don't know. I'm just a lowly reviewer. Either way, I've seen 4 films from Damien Chazelle and they've all been really good. He's 4 for 4, and this is easily one of the very best films of 2022, and it's essential viewing and should all go watch it. I implore all of you to watch it. You'll have a smashing time. Maybe not with mum, maybe not with grandma though. It's a little bit raunchy, but I say like no grandmas, but still, everyone should see it, really, but whatever. One final thing, I'd just like to humbly ask you to subscribe. You don't really have to, but please do. You don't have to, but please do. You don't have to, but please fucking do. Get off the stage, you disgusting fat fuck. 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 Get off the stage, you disgusting fat fuck.